Well, hi everybody. Welcome to another one of our free wellness webinars. This month we are going to be talking about breakfast, first meals, thinking outside the cereal box and what that even means. So we'll talk about how we define these things and giving you some options. Hopefully some of the takeaways when we are done with our conversation for today. The importance of a first meal, what to include in your breakfast to define it as quote unquote healthy. And also, we'll explore some of what we're calling non-traditional items because, we'll talk a little bit more about what that even means and how we're defining breakfast and so on. What we usually do in these webinars is a little housekeeping update here. So what you see in front of you, as you probably heard when you logged in, the session is being recorded. We always get a group of people that log on live, but we also have people who sign up for the webinars and can't come live, which is totally fine. So you'll get a copy of this recording after the fact, whether you were able to attend in person or not. I am reporting live from New York City, so you might hear some background noise or sirens. And we were just saying in the day and age of Zoom, let's just normalize all that and not worry about it. You can use the chat feature at any time. We actually might be even asking you some things over the course of our presentation today, but we also have carved out at the end of the presentation some proper formal Q&A. We also like to reiterate that while we work in the health sciences field, we're not working with you on an individual personalized manner. So please, consider this just informational and educational, and be sure to check in with your own personal individual healthcare providers before you start or stop any kind of regimen or health habits. As I said before, we will be collecting your information because you're registered, so we have your email on file. That will go into an email distribution list. After this webinar is done within a few days, you'll get a copy of the recording link. We also have a downloadable handout. I haven't done that in a very long time, so if you registered for this through the Eventbrite website, I think you had access to it there. If not, don't worry about it. It's going to come to you via the follow-up email, where you will also receive a link to a survey, because we love getting feedback from you and hearing how we could do things different or better. And there will also be a link on there to register for the next month's webinar as well. So, keep these things in mind, challenge yourself, learn a little bit of new things, and take into consideration whatever your takeaways are from here. If we've never met before, hello, my name is Dina D'Alessandro. I am a registered dietitian, nutritionist. I work mostly out of New York City, down in the Lower East Side in Manhattan, and I also work out of Ocean County, New Jersey. I'm also very fortunate to work in two roles over at Lehman College in the Bronx, which is where I went back to school to get my master's degree and do my dietetic internship. And so now I work there as an adjunct lecturer in the nutrition sciences department, and I work in the undergraduate and graduate programs there. And then I'm also the campus dietitian at the Student Health Center, in addition to running my own private practice. So I get a wide variety of patient populations, different life cycles, different chronic conditions, that I'm very fortunate to work with people and helping them understand and manage their health. You can see on screen a lot of the other things that qualify me to be doing what I'm doing. But one of the most favorite things I like to do is to mentor and precept nutrition students and dietetic interns, much like who is joining with me today as a co-facilitator. So I'll introduce you to Nahama.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I am Nahama, and I am a dietetic intern with Keith and Associates Distance Dietetic Internship. I am also in the process of completing my master's at Lamar University, where I'm studying applied nutrition. My past experiences include mental health clinic administration. I've worked at the clinic for the past 5 years, recently on a project called QIC, which stands for Quality Improvement Collaborative, and it is a New York State program that works with mental health clinics to implement programs that focus on improving client outcomes. I am also passionate about helping people manage their GI-related symptoms through nutrition intervention. So what is your go-to breakfast? In America, many people consider breakfast to be something like cereal or oatmeal or yogurt or eggs. Some people completely skip breakfast altogether or will have a coffee as they head out to work. What is your lightest meal? A lot of the time it is your lightest meal of the day. What is your current go-to breakfast? Would you like to put that in the chat box?
I'm adding the question in the chat too. If you're watching this as a recording, wherever it's housed, you can feel free to email me if you want to with any of your comments about that. Or if you end up seeing this eventually, it'll get posted also to the Dish with Dina television YouTube channel in a couple of months for public viewing. So if you're watching this live at that point, you can post a comment if you want to. Nahama, what is your current go-to breakfast? What are you eating these days?
Yeah, so most days of the week I'll either have some cereal with alternative milk because lactose intolerant, or I'll also have some days some eggs with either some crackers or some granola on the side or some version of that. That's my usual breakfast.
Yeah, I have a lot of things I put on rotation. I'm going to share a little bit about that later in the webinar. Like I'll kind of give everybody a sneak peek of my daily meal plan. But I put like so today I had cheesy eggs with some spinach in it, and then sometimes I do a smoothie, or sometimes I do an oatmeal bowl with some nuts or nut butter, something a little bit heartier depending on how much time I have during the morning. So thank you. If anyone else wants to share, let's see. I get a toast with butter and juice. And okay, good until about 12 or 1 p.m. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate that.
All right, so let's move on to the non-traditional breakfast. Do you have any non-traditional breakfasts? And if so, would you like to put it in the chat box? I'll go with my non-traditional breakfast that I have every Saturday. Every Saturday morning, we have what we call a Shabbos lunch or a Shabbos meal. And we will generally have either some bread with some, let's say, deli meat. A lot of the time we'll also have what we call a chalent, which is like this stew with some beans, barley, meat, potatoes. And then we'll usually have that as like a big meal. We'll all kind of sit together and we'll have that as a family.
That's very hearty. I was sharing with you earlier that I don't necessarily have like, however we're defining, traditional and non-traditional breakfast foods according to like America. We said before some cereal options, yogurt, etc. But I remember when I was in Italy, that's so my family is from Italy. When I was in Italy a handful of years ago, we had just come back from an 8 mile hike up and down a mountain. Like it was very strenuous. And it was part of a fundraiser we did for breast cancer. And when we returned on the way down, everybody's like, oh, they're going to have breakfast for us when we get back. And I was so excited because I was so hungry. And in some of the European countries, they have a very, very light first meal. And so when we got down from our walk, our hike, it was, I think, like what we call biscotti, right? Biscotti is like a hard cookie plus espresso, which is just a black coffee. And I thought to myself, this is no way going to fill me up. I really wish I would have brought something with me. So that was like non-traditional for me, but very traditional for them that they start off with something very light in that region. So we're going to jump into now the science behind the first meal. We want to share with you a little bit about the research that we have that supports some of the things that you see on screen with helping you with your first meal or your morning energy, some things that support overall mood and cognitive function, and also things about stabilizing your blood sugar levels.
So energy, which we're talking about calories in this case. And when we wake up, our body has been fasting for several hours. When we eat, it helps us kind of jumpstart our metabolism, which is the process of using the food for energy. And when we eat breakfast, we will break that fast, literally breakfast, break fast, and give our bodies the energy that it needs to fuel. Just like in a car, when you fuel up a car before a long road trip, you wouldn't get very far if you didn't fuel your tank. But in the morning, when we have breakfast, we're fueled for the day. Skipping breakfast can lead to sluggishness, brain fog, or lack of focus. And studies actually show that eating in the morning improves concentration, memory, and problem-solving skills, which are essential if you are at work, in school, managing your daily routine. It is important to eat in the morning to allow with your mood and cognition to be at its best.
When we talk about blood sugar, and if you want to learn a little bit more about this and also the discussion around brain health too, we have a variety of wellness webinars already posted onto the playlist in the YouTube channel that dive a little bit deeper. So a lot of times when people think about blood sugar, they think about being diagnosed with something like diabetes, type 1, type 2, or gestational diabetes during pregnancy. But really, everybody could benefit from helping support those hormonal fluctuations that naturally happen when we are first waking up and kind of kickstarting our day. We're very much fans of front loading calories. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means coming up in the following slides. But basically, it's about providing yourself, like we just said, right, with kind of like getting that car out of the garage, with providing yourself with that energy required during the time that you're going to be most active. So making sure there is fuel in your body that can be utilized. And then that can also help with stabilizing and managing overall blood sugar levels so you're not spiking and dropping and craving things and having those mood swings over the course of the day. This can also lead to even better sleep quality too, because if you're front loading some of your calories, if you're timing the foods correctly, then that helps with stabilizing blood sugar and everything gets a little bit more well supportive over the course of the day. We're going to talk to you about barriers. So I know for me, I work oh gosh, I'd say at this point, probably thousands of people that I've worked with, and a lot of people, a good majority of them will say things like, I don't have a first meal, or I'll just have a cup of coffee, or I don't have the time to make something for myself, or I don't have the appetite. So we're going to talk a little bit too about some of these potential barriers to having a first meal in the coming slides.
So it is important to recognize that not everyone has time in the morning to create a breakfast that is probably ideal. In the morning when your alarm goes off, you're on your way out the door and you're rushing and you don't always even feel hungry because you're just rushing and not even having time. So what are some things we can do to alleviate that? We can prep ahead when you're getting ready either the night before or consider prepping what you have on hand. And then you can also batch cook, which you can create meals, let's say a week at a time or even a month at a time. You can put it in, meals in your freezer, in your cabinets. You can have all these different meals all put it together at one time, and that way you can have it for 3 different meals or 10 different meals. Another option would be to put some easy grab and go options in your fridge. So that might include some overnight oats, it might include some chia pudding or a pre-made breakfast burrito or an egg cup. I've seen some people put some burrito or type thing in the freezer with everything already prepared. You just take it out, pop it in the microwave, and you've got yourself a nutritious and delicious meal.
And then when it comes to appetite, this is quite common as well. Some people will say, I just don't have the cue, like I don't get that hunger cue that kicks in. And that's quite common. Whether you're just a person who just doesn't necessarily feel that kick in, or as we get older, sometimes those cues, those triggers decrease, or if you are on certain medicines or regimens like that, that can kind of suppress your hunger as well. But just because the little alarm, internal alarm doesn't go off doesn't mean that you shouldn't be fueling your body. So we very much encourage you to set timers or reminders throughout the day to make sure that you are being consistent with some of your food intake, again, to allow yourself to support those energy needs, even if it's something small. So as an example, like we have here, something like a handful of nuts with some fruit, or if you're having something a little bit heartier, maybe a few bites of that, or if you're making a smoothie for yourself, maybe a few sips of that, or just something like a hard-boiled egg, just something that can allow your body to start off with that energy needs. And potentially over time, from what I've heard from feedback from a lot of people that I work with, they do say eventually their body does sort of kind of pick up on those cues and that appetite may return. So that might be something that you're noticing as well. We also wanted to mention too, if a barrier is related to medication timing. So I believe Synthroid, right? So when people are on medicines for their thyroid or really any medicine that you're taking first thing in the morning that is being told to take on an empty stomach, obviously you wouldn't be eating with that. So we want to make sure that you check your labels, you check the insert with the medicine, you check with your healthcare providers and or your pharmacist to understand more about how long you need to wait before you have that first meal. Or if the timing is that you need to eat it with food, then to have a little something in your stomach or shortly beforehand, before you take the medicine is important. One of the things that I checked that I came across, I should say, while we were researching for this webinar had to do with the medicine known as levodopa. So levodopa is related to Parkinson's disease for people who I believe not are at risk for, but who are managing the early signs of it. There's actually a macronutrient stipulation there. So it's not necessarily taking that particular medicine on an empty stomach or with food, but if it is with food, there's a protein distinction, as in do not eat protein with it. You have to wait a particular window of time before you can have your protein sources. And so I bring this up because a lot of what we're going to share with you has to do with balancing your meals. And so obviously, if that is one of the indications or counter indications when you're taking a medicine like levodopa, obviously, pay attention to the directions around that too. So if you're eating with food, do that. If you need to wait, wait. And if you have to kind of coordinate those macronutrient requirements, then please make sure you're doing that as well. And obviously, if you have any questions, you make sure you're checking with your provider or pharmacist.
We're not going to get in the way of somebody who says that they would like to fast for religious reasons or personal preference. However, we might recommend against implementing a formal intermittent fasting approach for a few of the following populations. Firstly, people with a history of an eating disorder. That might be something that would trigger them and create disordered behaviors or worsen their recovery. Another population would be children and teens who are still growing and need constant energy intake. There's also pregnant or breastfeeding people who need extra nutrients and calories, or people with diabetes or blood sugar issues, especially those on insulin or medication, due to the risk of hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, and medical supervision is essential for those. Another population includes people with heart disease. Intermittent fasting may be risky for people with current or past heart issues, and anyone with any chronic medical condition or who's underweight, fasting might worsen their health or nutritional status. And lastly, people on any medications that require food. Skipping meals may interfere with medication timing or the effectiveness of that.
Right. And when we talked about just now, we mentioned the fasting discussion, and I'll talk about this too coming up in this next slide about like the diet myths. A lot of times people just are curious about what that means. What's an intermittent fast? So we like to just define that as there's either a caloric restriction or a restricted window of time where people are eating what they need over the course of the day. And so sometimes that is a trend or a popular approach. When we see information about that, it's almost always directly related to something like weight loss, but our approach is quite neutral in that conversation. So we really like to step away and look at the overarching needs of somebody on an individual basis of what's supporting their health and what's supporting their chronic conditions. So some of the stuff that I was looking up when it came to these like, diet myths about is breakfast really the most important meal of the day? And I did notice somebody had mentioned in one of their blogs coming across something about breakfast in America was only invented as a marketing ploy to sell cereal, but I think it's important to recognize, and we have talked about this in a lot of the past webinars too, globally speaking, grain-based foods are part of everybody's staple items, traditional meals. So it's not just because, we have cereal here that we're trying to sell on the aisles when people are going grocery shopping, but just recognizing that a first meal might be important to kick off and kickstart our energy needs. And sometimes that includes a grain-based food item. So is it the most important meal of the day? It might not be considered the most important. I think we could argue that all of the food that you eat is important, especially if you are managing a chronic condition. So, equally laid out like that. Also, one of the other things that I came across too was about, how you must eat breakfast, or it's something around the lines of you have to eat within a certain amount of time of waking up. Not necessarily the case. Again, we just got done saying some people just don't or can't, or they have medication timings that might be counterindicated there. So it's more about not coming up with a rule of like within 30 minutes you have to have X amount of food in your stomach, but usually within the first few hours after waking up is when those blood sugars are going to start kind of kicking in and stabilizing, and we want to make sure we're meeting your nutrition needs and your energy needs as well. Carbs and proteins eaten together, or shouldn't be eaten together, I should say. So that's something that we kind of say yes, but so again, we mentioned before with one of those medications where there might be a stipulation about not being able to eat a particular macronutrient, and macros are your carbs, your fats, and your proteins. We have started to see there could be benefit if you eat your food ingredients separately, that there could be some benefit to blood sugar levels and fullness factors if you start off with a protein or a fiber rich source first, and then if you have the grain-based foods or the more carby type of things coming after that. So a protein or a healthy fat first, or some fibrous type of food first, and then following it up with the carbohydrate foods. So again, it's individual preference. And then the last thing on there too about bigger breakfasts are better, we would also argue it depends. It depends on the quality and literally what the quantity of that breakfast is. So if your first meal is really heavy, like an 800-calorie bomb of something, you might feel super sluggish trying to digest that. By nature, your body's going to want to slow down a little bit. So we don't necessarily think that you have to front load that heavily, just small things that feel appropriate. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too in the coming slides. Before I actually advance to the next slide, I didn't put in the presentation today, but we always like to acknowledge what are known as the social determinants of health, meaning that not everybody is in charge or in control of their health outcomes or what is available and accessible to them. So you have different environmental factors, quality, location, etc. And right now, a lot of the conversation is based around budget. So actually, a couple of people that I've worked with recently have said to me they can't afford food. So it's about finding what works best for you and the resources that are available to you, whether you're working with a dietitian or you're working with a social worker or a case manager, or even even looking up things in the immediate area that are accessible to you, like maybe a food pantry or a religious organization that has free meals on a certain day. If you have control over your food, the things that you're creating for yourself, we do encourage you to try to make it from scratch or semi-homemade meals as best as possible, because then you're in control of the actual ingredients and you're in control of the budget too, versus spending money on takeout foods, which probably are going to be more expensive. You might remember in a couple of our other past webinars, especially I think in March, we do the National Nutrition Month. So we talk a lot about food waste and sustainable practices. So inventorying what's on hand is really good too. Taking a look at what your food items that are about to expire or things in the back of your freezer that you forgot all about and bringing those out. And also acknowledging that fresh foods, seasonally, locally grown is great, but if you have and can afford more items like frozen or canned items, those could be equally nutritionally dense as well and probably more budget friendly. So please, make options that are available to you that feel more convenient to you. Protein sources. So I talk about like units of measurement and cost per serving, but I also want to acknowledge it's hard just to buy one egg. You can't just buy one egg. You need to buy a dozen eggs. But when it comes to protein sources, we do recognize that most animal meats are going to be higher in price and more expensive. And then plant-based proteins like tofu, dried beans, lentils, canned goods like that too, or even things like canned fish, like canned tuna, should be a little bit more budget friendly. I'm a big fan of also purchasing a carton of egg whites, which will help with adding in some extra protein to your meal. And it kind of like, again, lengthens the availability if you have a dozen eggs on hand, that you're not going through them as fast as you might if you only have the eggs and not the egg whites. So again, figuring out what your budget and costs are there. And the last thing on the list that I was researching too was the cost of milk. Like we're talking actual dairy milk, cow's milk, goat's milk, etc. The dairy farmers, I believe, are paid by the butter fat content of their milk. So this is why whole milk is going to probably be more expensive than something like a fat-free or a 1% version instead. So you could opt to do something like that if you're trying to save money, or you could even buy something like a can or a container of non-fat dry milk powder, where you can use in place of something like a protein powder, or you can add to your smoothies.
So when we look across the globe, you may notice some common themes with some individuals or communities having specific types of habits and also having specific types of meals. So just as in the Healthy Aging Blue Zone webinar a while back, which you can look at the Dish with Dina TV on YouTube, you can notice that a lot of the recommendations, so a lot of those meals that they had were similar in specific types of cultures. So you can look at beyond the traditional ingredients. You can be inspired by different cultures, different parts of the world. You may look at just how Americans eat, but you can also look at other parts of the world at how other people eat as well. We do want to be mindful with the types of eating that we are. So you may want to consider portion sizes. You may want to look at a balanced plate and also recognize your fullness. We also want to bring up plant-based. So plant-based may include some more fiber-rich foods, some veggies, and some grains. And we also want to try and have some protein-forward meals. So that may include foods that are not just a carb on its own. So that way we can avoid some blood sugar spikes, which may be more specific toward somebody with type 2 diabetes. But that also is important for other people in general, just to when you're eating on an empty stomach, consider pairing a carb with a protein and a healthy fat, such as an apple, a peanut butter with toast, and avocado and egg, or you might consider an oatmeal with nuts, just to combine the protein with the carb that you're eating. We also want to recognize the time of meals so that when you eat your protein with your fiber with your first meal, it can kind of help you for the rest of the day. All right, so here's just a quick Google search of different traditional breakfasts from people all over the world. We've got all different types of breakfasts. In New York City, we have many wonderful and diverse cultures in our boroughs, and we would like to honor and respect other people's food as well. So let's take a look at some of these examples. You can also put in the chat box if you have eaten or heard of any of these foods as well. Shakshuka. So this one excited me. Being somebody who has visited the Middle East, it was very exciting for me when I got to eat this. It is actually a traditional North African and Middle Eastern food called shakshuka, and it is made by poaching eggs in a flavorful tomato sauce and pepper sauce. It is typically served while hot with a bread on the side for dipping in.
Yeah, I am a big shakshuka fan as well, as you and I had talked about too. These next ones coming up, I haven't tried. So this, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it correctly. This one's called nasi lemak, and it is a fragrant Malaysian dish that is cooked in coconut milk and also something known as pandan leaves, which I believe are the things that you see off to the side. It's their version of kind of like a fragrant, sweet, also could be savory vanilla type of thing that they ingredient they include to add some more texture and flavor profiles to their dishes. So this here is typically served with an accompaniment that includes what is known as sambal, which is a spicy chili paste, which I believe you see off to the right-hand side. There's also fried anchovies, peanuts, cucumber, and a boiled egg. So this is their first meal. And again, you can see it's grain-based because most of the globe does have rice or some sort of grain version included, but it also has a variety of other things that we might look at as more like savory options in comparison to the American traditional meal. This next one is Greek. This is known as kaluri, which is like a Greek bagel or a bread ring. It is a very popular street food and breakfast in Greece as well. And it's very simple in its way. You can see here it does have the sesame seeds on top, which lend to a healthy fat source. And they have it with a light coffee drink or a dark kind of espresso looking drink as well. It kind of reminds me of what I was saying before with the ones that start off their first meal with that type of texture, crispy texture. Next up, if anybody has ever visited Jamaica or is from Jamaica, we acknowledge ackee and saltfish. Ackee is, I believe, the national fruit, and it can also be utilized almost like a vegetable too in their meals. So this is also popular in Caribbean cuisine too, and it's treated like a vegetable sometimes. So we have salt cod or salt fish. In Italy, this is known as bacala. In Spain, this is known as bacalao. So the language, again, that you might or might not be familiar with, this is their version of their first meal, and it is often served with sauteed, I think you can see it on here, sauteed onions, peppers, tomatoes, other seasonings, and usually served with a dumpling of some sort or other side dishes, which I think is what you can see on the back right side. And then last but not least here again, just as an example of all of the things that we came across with the global cultural foods of their first meals, we have something known as idli. This is a type of savory rice cake or rice patty. This does originate from South India. It's popular as a breakfast food with some condiments, dipping sauces as well. And that also, I believe we saw in Sri Lanka. So again, just things to kind of inspire you and get ideas of what is considered quote unquote traditional breakfast in other places of the world, maybe not so traditional in America.
Building a better breakfast. If you're finding yourself in a funk or struggling to figure out what to make for your first meal, here is some guidance. You may look at balance and timing of the meals and prepping and planning ahead.
I'm going to start with the balance discussion. We kind of talked about this a little bit earlier in some of the slides. And if you are currently managing a chronic condition like diabetes, there's a whole webinar on diabetes in our YouTube channel. As I mentioned earlier, when we first kicked off, all of these things, whether you have register to attend in person, or we'll be getting the recording after the fact. In about a couple of months, all of these go into the YouTube channel available for public viewing. So to add on to what we're talking about here, if you want to dive a little bit deeper, there's a meal planning webinar, there's a diabetes webinar, and there's also a macro/micro webinar too, where we talk a lot more specifically about these things. So when we talk about balance, what we're talking about is the quality and the quantity. The quantity is, as we mentioned earlier, the energy or the calories that you receive from your macronutrients, which are your carbs, your fats, and your proteins. And in the carbohydrate family is where the fiber-rich foods live as well. So those are things like your beans, your lentils, your leafy greens, etc. The micronutrients are your, what I like to call your quality of your foods. Those are the vibrantly colored, different textures and flavors that are available to you in different ingredients. And these transport for you the vitamins and minerals that allow your body and your cells to function properly. So this is why we like saying, have a diversified diet, balance things as best as you can, have a little bit of everything represented in as many meals as possible, aim for variety, color, texture, etc. Odds are if you do that, you'll probably be hitting everything that you need in the course of your day. Next up, we have timing and energy. So we kind of alluded to that a little bit earlier too, but we like to say about 100 calories equals about an hour's worth of food. So if you zoom out and you look at the standard American diet and the recommendations of about 2,000 calories per day, we're not talking about 100 calories eaten every single hour. We're talking more about how we can front load and move around the different kinds of meals to help support our activity levels over the course of the day. So, as an example, if you do eat something very small, like you don't have a great appetite, just kind of kickstarting your day with maybe a hard-boiled egg or a container of yogurt or a little thing of oatmeal, that's maybe about 100 and 150 calories max to kick off. So you can kind of take that into account and think to yourself, all right, in about 2 hours, I'm probably going to be hungry again. And my next actual meal is not until like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's where you can kind of plan ahead and make available to you, whether you're bringing it with you or purchasing outside, of something to eat in between, either a snack or a mini meal or a pre-meal that you're having from your part two down the line. So when you're kicking off your first meal of the day, the breakfast, that's I would set a timer for myself, because if I get in the zone and I kind of forget to eat or take a break, I can say, okay, I'm going to naturally be hungry within a few hours, etc. And also taking into account too the quality and the quantity together. So if this is a balanced meal and you have something like a 300 or 400 calorie meal, but it's mostly carb dense, it probably won't last you as long as far as fullness factor, unless you put a protein or a fat source with it that kind of extends that satiety, that fullness factor again. So just taking those things into account, using that car analogy, kind of like fueling your body as you go.
So it is so important to stress about how important it is to be consistent and have some kind of structure or routine if you want to be successful at supporting your health and managing any diagnoses that you may have. So the best way to do that is to look at your daily and weekly schedules, whether you prepare on Sunday mornings or whether you're going to when you're going to the grocery store. Uh, you can even prepare the night before, like we had said earlier, but it's important to decide what kind of meals you want to make or eat and plan them ahead of time or at the time that you're eating it. In the meal planning webinar from January 2025, which is also available on the Dish with Dina TV, which is on YouTube, we talked about giving yourself flexibility, but not sacrificing your needs. For instance, if you know you're going to be working late a couple days in a row, then you might plan to either bring food along with you or buy near your work. Or if you have a wedding coming up and you're planning that event, then you may decide to either indulge in some of the foods available at the wedding, or maybe you might decide to eat a light meal before or after, and enjoy a more nutritious before and after meal as well, just to kind of balance that out. The same recommendations apply to your first meal with preparing and planning.
If anybody is doing this already, put it in the chat. Are you, again, looking at your week at a glance or day at a glance? And we like to also kind of define what this means, like the planning ahead. I'll share with you on screen here. This is an example I've shared before. It's not very well written. I don't like the font on here, so I apologize if you can't read it. But you can see on top there, I have all of the breakfasts, and I'm pretty much, like I said before, a three-trick pony. I put certain things on rotation. I look at my schedule at a glance, so I know when I might be working late, or if I have more of a front-loaded type of meal, like I have a hearty brunch that I'm going to on a Saturday, I might eat much lighter during the rest of the day, or maybe just have like a yogurt or something to kind of have my second meal, and then eat a little bit heartier later on as my third meal. Or I might take leftovers and integrate them into my breakfast or lunch. So, again, I kind of just, it's not super specific. It just gives me an overview of understanding what and where my food is going to be available to me. And then if I need to prepare, so we have the planning part of it like this. And then if I need to prepare, that would be when I'm doing my grocery shopping, or I'm chopping, slicing, dicing my ingredients, or as Nahama mentioned earlier too, like batch cooking something or putting things in the fridge ahead of time that I can grab and go. And I actually have some examples here, so I'll share that with you on screen right now. So I'm an egg eater. If I have the time like I did today, I make them fresh on the stove. If not, I'll do something like this. This is a quiche, vegetables, a lot of stuff, hearty stuff in there. You could also do something like egg cups in like muffin tins. That's something that you can heat up as you go, pop them out as needed. You can even freeze them if you want to. I don't have a huge freezer, so I usually stick these in the fridge. And I also don't have a microwave, so I don't mind necessarily eating certain things at room temperature. But again, depending on your flavor preferences, this could be a great option that you can kind of grab a slice and eat it on your way to work, or bring it with you to your desk if you're sitting down and working from home or at school. Another example here. So my smoothies, a joke that I always feel like I'm mowing the lawn with my face. I've gotten very used to having greens in my smoothies, and this is another one of these examples of how you can balance a meal. So if you like having fruit or you like having something sweet, you can offset some of those things. In my case, you can see from bottom to top, I have some sliced avocado at the bottom. I have a handful of leafy greens in that second layer. There is not, I mean, when you look at this at a glance, it looks a little ridiculous, but it tastes okay. It tastes okay. And depending on your flavor preferences, you might want to add maybe like a half a banana just to make it a little sweeter, or a little drizzle of syrup if you feel like you need it. But for me, I've gotten used to the flavors in here. There's some frozen strawberries on the top, or I should say fresh strawberries on the top. And then I usually use water or almond milk. And if I feel like I need it, maybe I'll throw in some protein powder or some non-fat, dried powder in there too, just to kind of extend that protein quality to it. And this is a balanced meal versus if I'm asking somebody what they have for their smoothies and they just tell me, oh, it's mango and pineapple and coconut water. That's not as balanced. That might be kind of like a carb heavy blood sugar spike. So again, on an empty stomach, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. If you're having it after you've eaten, that might be a little bit better as far as not spiking your blood sugar so much. So again, having some kind of quality or balance in that too. And then this is an example of my oatmeal bowl. So I just do packets, like the instant packets of oatmeal. And I do use just plain water with that, so I'm not making it with milk, but I stir in some nut butter, almond butter, peanut butter, and then sometimes I'll also put a dollop of either Greek yogurt or cottage cheese, which is a little tangy. Not everybody loves those flavors or textures together. So again, if that's something that you don't love, you can eat them separately. And then I'll usually put some kind of fresh berries on that as well. Again, just as examples of what the real life dietitian does in her world of what I'm eating for breakfast. And if anyone else wants to chime in, we mentioned before, if you missed what we were asking, if what's your go-to breakfast or what are certain things that you feel are maybe like non-traditional right now, you can feel free to add that to the chat as well.
At the end of every webinar, we'll ask what are some of your takeaways that you would like to take with you and what resonated with you, if you'd like to put that in the chat as well. So let's talk about some things that we'll start, some things we'll keep, and some things that we'll stop. Let's say you might want to start adding another protein to your breakfast, or you might want to keep going with your current meal that you have been enjoying for breakfast. Or you may want to stop having, one of the traditional things that you've had so far and try somebody else's traditional food. Maybe like a spouse or a partner has, given you some insight into what their culture usually has for breakfast, and you might want to try some of that. What are some of the foods that you may want to try or continue, or, let's see what else is there.
Yeah, I was saying whenever we come to this, I do this slide in all of the webinars that we put together because it's a nice moment to kind of reflect on things. Maybe you're already in the middle of doing things that you feel work for you, so keep on doing that. But for me, this also makes me kind of recommit and reassess the things that I'm doing. Not that I have to force myself to lead and live by example, but just to kind of honor my own needs whenever we're doing these webinars. So think of what you might want to take away. So I wanted to share, because we have been doing monthly free monthly wellness webinars now for 3 years in a row. We did them before COVID, and then during COVID restrictions, we kind of stopped and did a little bit different stuff, and we were doing other retreats and virtual things. And so we're going to wind down. This is going to be the last year that we're going to do monthly free wellness webinars. For now. And the reason is because we have so much available. So, like I said earlier, when you're registering for these things, you have access to join us live. You have access to get the recording when we're done. And then a couple of months after the fact, we also upload them to the YouTube channel, the Dish with Dina YouTube channel. So there's tons of playlists in there. I really would love, I mean, a goal of mine is to get like at least 500 subscribers on that channel, because I've been posting on there pretty steadily and it's slowly creeping up. So I would love if you go on there and check out things, share them with people. This is going a little bit deeper into some of the other things that we talked about, like meal planning or sustainable eating. And then we definitely have a lot of stuff that is chronic condition specific. So if you need guidance, you can go in there and check things out. This is all free for you. We're going to wrap up our monthly webinars at the end of this year. And then next year, we're going to do what I hope feels very affordable. We're going to do fee-based quarterly workshops to, again, have a little bit more robust second part of what we've been doing up until now. So I don't know the topics just yet. And when you get the email to follow up and you have the little survey in there just asking for feedback, share with us what you might be interested in. We might do something like a 2 hour workshop. And I think I always hover around $28. Like I feel like that feels kind of legit and affordable. And so we'll put some workshops together maybe every quarter. And this way you can attend in person live or you can register and get the recording after the fact. And that will not be uploaded to YouTube because you pay for that. So we'll have that just be specific to you. And this way we can go a little bit deeper. We can put people on a path of a little bit more support and whatever they need to kind of encourage you to whatever it is. It's goal setting stuff or condition management, things along those lines. I also want to share too. So I mentioned earlier, I own and operate a private practice. It's quite part-time because I do a lot of other things, so I can't do this full time. But I'm always taking new clients, and thank goodness now I'm also able to be in network with a large amount of, I think, some of the more popular health insurance plans. So you don't have, if you can't pay out of pocket, you can always work with me for nutrition counseling one-on-one, where we could do a little bit of a deeper dive. Because of the regulations by state, I'm working in a virtual setting, so I can't see everybody for everything everywhere, but I'm very happy to announce that I can, if anybody's working with me and they're located in Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Virginia. I can work with you there. And I think I'm also going to be up for an application in Florida. So if you are residing in any of those states, because, we do this, the webinar stuff here, I meet people from across the globe, across the country. So if you're willing to work with me or you think we're a good fit, come check me out. Check out the dishwithdina.com website, learn a little bit more about the services I provide, and schedule an appointment with me. And if your insurance covers it, you can get anywhere between 3 to 10 to unlimited visits per year, depending on, again, what the eligibility is there. So it makes me a little sad to not like be doing these anymore, but I feel like we've put a lot of effort, and I hope that for those of you who have come a little bit more regularly, that we've given you a lot of content and a lot of quality stuff that you can take away with you. So as I said before, right now, if you want to, you can have questions, comments, and feedback you can throw into the chat box right now if you want to. We thank you very much for being here. I'm very grateful to Nahama also for co-facilitating this with me. You'll receive the follow-up email whether you're attending live or you register to receive the recording of this. You'll get the survey link. Oh, I said before, right? We're doing a handout. That's something new we didn't do before. So you'll get a downloadable handout there too. And then there'll also be a link if you're interested in registering for the next free monthly wellness webinar, which is going to take place on Thursday, September 11 from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern time, that you can have access to that. And that's going to be a discussion around nutrition facts labels, what to look for, how to be a savvy supermarket shopper, and some updated information about nutrition facts label that may be coming down the pike in the next couple of years. I am available on the internet and the social media space as Dish with Dina. I'm not very active anymore in a lot of things, but I live there when I need to. And like I said, you can also come check out my website there too. So thanks everybody so much for being here. I really hope you got some good takeaways or even just validated things that you're already doing and feel like you're doing a good job. So thanks everyone, and we'll hope to see you again next month. Bye.